Good evening, everyone. I will now call this meeting of council to order November 8th at 5 p.m. I will start with our land acknowledgement. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabe, the people of the Three Fires, known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi Nation, who have inhabited this land from time immemorial, and further give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We also recognize the Métis and Inuit whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples. I'm doing the reflection tonight, and what I came up with, for thousands of years, Indigenous peoples have lived and journeyed on this land, weaving their identity and their spirituality intimately with the land. European colonization came about in large part because of the doctrine of discovery, a flawed understanding that ignored Indigenous presence on the land. Affirming the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and therefore repudiating the wrong of such a doctrine is part of the reason for stating our land acknowledgement at the beginning of every meeting. We are all treaty people, and we in Georgian Bluffs are actually part of treaties 45 and a half, 72, and 82. Looking to the future, I would hope that we can learn from our Indigenous neighbors how to care for this land our ancestors took without understanding the magnitude of what they were doing. That we can be part of the solution that breathes healing, justice, hope, and compassion into all our relations and sets us all free from the evils of colonization. Moving on with the agenda, I'm going to read the recommendation first, that item 13.1 DEV 2023-52 Cobble Beach Phase 3 Pre-Servicing Agreement and item 14.1.2 Bylaw 2023-072 Cobble Beach Pre-Servicing Agreement be deferred to an upcoming committee of the whole meeting and that the agenda be approved as amended. Does anyone else have any other additions or amendments to the agenda? Seeing none, could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Coburn, Councillor Thompson. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? It's carried. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest to be declared? Seeing none, you may declare at any time throughout the meeting. The minutes of our October 18th, 2023 meeting. The recommendation is that the minutes of the council meeting held on October 18th, 2023 be adopted. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Thompson. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Does any member wish to make an announcement? Being known. The only comment I have in this, I intended to bring it up last week when we talked about the Remembrance Day. The Kemble Santa Claus Parade is the second Sunday in December, which I think is the 10th of December at 2 o'clock. I will be there, and I think there's a plan to be there, some of staff to hand out calendars. Anyone else in council would like to join me? That would be appreciated. It's fun time. Councillor Thompson.
Don't turn me on. I can't leave it on. Get it? Smart. That's great. I'm thrilled to be there. I'm not able to attend. I'll be booked. Yeah, that's true.
Thank you. So moving on, we have no public hearings, delegations, and public question period. For items on the agenda, any person who wishes to appear before council regarding an item on the agenda shall make written application to the clerk by 3 p.m. the day of the meeting. To register, go to www.georgianbluffs.ca/delegations or call the clerk's office at 519-376-2729 extension 603. Registrants for items on the agenda will have 5 minutes to provide comments. And this evening, I understand we have, is this where Mr. Davenport is wanting to present? And so we need to waive the procedural bylaw. So I need a mover and a seconder to waive the procedural bylaw to allow registrants on item 13.1 who are returning within the 6-month limitation. I have a mover and a seconder, please. Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Coburn. I will call the vote. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. So, welcome, Murray. You have 5 minutes for your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton, members of council. I appear before you tonight as opposed to virtually because I am seriously concerned about what is happening on the Cobble Beach Phase 3, the Dell. My family owns the lands on the south side of Churchside Road East. The first parcel of land we bought in 1973, so about 50 years ago, and but it's lands that's been designated for development. Our first draft of we made application for draft plan of subdivision, and the first draft was an 8-lot subdivision serviced by municipal water and individual septic systems. The city of Peterborough and Rob McLeish of Cobble Beach objected to that concept plan based on the fact that the plan was being serviced without municipal sewer and water. Township staff and county staff met with Georgian Villas and made an agreement to extend the sanitary sewer to Churchside Road East. We altered our draft plan to accommodate that change. The County of Grey then granted conditions of draft plan approval based on the agreement that's on, and that agreement is on record today. It's a contract between the township and the developer of Cobble Beach, and we are the benefactors of that contract. So the township or Cobble Beach cannot change that agreement without my permission. The sanitary sewer is planned to be constructed along McLeish Drive from the existing street southerly through an approved draft plan of subdivision to Churchside Road East. The township retained the services of Crozier and Associates Engineering Company to prepare engineering design drawings for that extension. We have received a draft copy of these design drawings. However, the sanitary sewer has never been constructed. For the record, Crozier Engineering was the consulting engineering firm of record for Georgian Villas at the time that the township retained their services. They were also working for Georgian Shores subdivision to the south of our property. So we're the meat and the sandwich between two major developers. Georgian Villas have since replaced Crozier and Associates as their consulting engineer. The sanitary sewers have not been extended today, and so the township is holding up the development of our lands. We've asked, you keep changing staff, so we've asked various staff members, what is the reason? Why aren't we going ahead? What's the problem? And the answer that I get constantly has been, we have to have a meeting. Okay, why don't we have the meeting? And that's Jennifer Burnett, Cynthia Fletcher, and even Jeff Graham, who's doing a study in the area as well. We've heard that the ratepayers within the Cobble Beach subdivision request that a construction road service the Dell rather than have gravel trucks and other heavy construction equipment travel on existing road system within Cobble Beach. This is a reasonable neighbor request in any plan of subdivision when a developer is constructing the later phases of an existing development. In fact, Harold Sutherland Construction serviced the last phase 2, by building a construction road directly from County Road 1 to the plan of subdivision that he was servicing. Unfortunately, the house builders do not use that construction road to build the houses. I've developed in my career 125 plans of subdivision in different roles, and it is quite common for the condition of draft plan approval to have a special construction road that diverts the traffic, all the traffic, away from the existing housing within the existing development. Consideration of rezoning of the subject lands within Cobble Beach Phase 3 from planned development to the R18 zone to permit the proposed residential development on the subject lands is premature until such time as the agreement between Georgian Villas and the township of Georgian Bluffs to extend the sanitary sewer to Church Side Road East has been honored. We hereby request that any decision of council we be notified of any decision of council. And okay, that's my statement. Any questions?
Thank you, Murray. I don't think we'll go to questions at this point. I think we will. We all have a copy of your comments and staff will have that. So we will consider this as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So moving on with the agenda, item 12.1.13, private road update for Big Bay. Ken McPherson. So welcome, Ken. You have 5 minutes for your presentation as well. Ken, you're muted and we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks very much. If I seem a little frazzled, I just spent 45 minutes with my provider trying to get on my, because of weather or whatever. Anyways, they couldn't get me on, so they spent 45 minutes getting in another way. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council members, Acting CAO, and staff, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this topic. My name is Ken McPherson, and I've been a seasonal resident of Private Road for 66 years. That's since 1957. Nothing I say tonight is meant to detract from the work Mr. Grant or Mr. Anderson have done to date. Ongoing look at maps as well as examinations of deeds may establish the council has a responsibility. This means this issue may continue. However, my presentation for this evening has undergone many revisions, but this morning I scrapped all of these in favor of what I hope is a simplification of the issue. Extensive work by staff and ratepayers has been put into this request, but I respectfully suggest we are no closer to a solution. I suggest we take a step back and look at what Mr. Grant is asking for. For absolute transparency, Jim is a friend of mine. I have watched over the last 3 years the frustration of getting to his cottage. Conditions have worsened and show no sign of improvement. The other affected parties share his concerns and frustrations. I think the councillors and CAO who have actually visited the road, and we thank them for doing that, will understand the concerns. The comments at the last meeting, it is passable. And then the description that the CAO gives of the road conditions gives an indication of where we're at right now. It's a very low standard of expectations as far as getting around. Imagine an ambulance required to answer a call on this road, particularly after a rainstorm, when the puddles hide where that passable trail is. Not too bad, you can maneuver through when you can see it, but very difficult when there's water in it. But different from previous issues around blocking the road, the holes do nothing to stop the, oh boy. Okay. The holes do nothing to stop the prescriptive rights that people have. it doesn't stop them from going in. Last time this topic got attention, the meeting involved police and fire, but this time it shouldn't be the same. The right of travel is not challenged. Cottagers are able to exercise their right of access, and I find nothing in the Road Access Act that describes road maintenance requirements. The answer, to take it to court, is both a costly one with no guarantee of an outcome, and I believe would create winners and losers and greatly harm the community spirit of Big Bay. After listening carefully to Mr. Grant's presentation, you will note he is simply asking your assistance in making it possible to get to his cottage, not take over the road at great expense. I will note that over my lifetime, this road has been a very unifying factor where people walk it to access the ice cream store or the dock. People of all ages walk by and wave, but also respect owners' privacy. The holes are starting to make this tradition even much harder for some, particularly again after rainfalls. In my request to speak on November 1st, I asked 3 questions. Today, I'm only going to comment on one. And do you people all have that application I made for the last meeting? Okay, because I filled in one of those forms, which came back to me. So the question, which I applied at that time, is there is mention in the report of historical objections to the road being assisted. And I asked this group, in your investigations, how many owners on private road today objected to township work being done, even on a courtesy basis? How was this information gathered for this report? I am definitely not looking for names. I'm just looking for how many so that we have an idea of the extent of the issue and maybe we can work towards a solution. I ask this because just as I know that Jim Grant is a friend, I will indicate I am friends with the other parties who have the holes. I'm not afraid to respectfully disagree with friends on specific terms, but I believe it is important to listen to all people's concerns. So I went to a couple of them. One family, partway down the road, told me that they fully intend to fill in the holes. A mother previously owned the property. She has passed away now, and they intend to fix it. So that particular one partway down will be eliminated. I then phoned another individual who has substantial holes on theirs and asked them about it. Part of the problem is I think that maybe we are tackling the wrong question. We think we're simply dealing with a road access question here. It is not a road access question because people can get access. Let's see. Oh yeah, the holes are not intended to deny access, according to this person. Big Bay is recognized as one of the gems of Georgian Bluffs in Grey County, as we yearly boast on Canada Day. With blogs and expanded tourism on the Bruce, it has become busier each year. The real concern is not the cottagers' travel, I would purport, but rather the tourists' curiosity, and they're ignoring the signs and they head off down private road. The West End gets 100% of these people. To make matters worse, many then change their minds and turn around on private property. Further down the road, a Cottage Lane has had to erect a gate to stop traffic going through their property. And at the end, there is not a turnaround. So once again, even at the far end, the east end, there is the problem of people turning around on other property. The other problem that is associated with this is the speed with which these people go on the road. They go down quicker very often. And even if they don't go down quicker in things, what they actually are is they're tourists. They're looking around at the islands. They're looking around at the cottages. They're looking at around the beauty of the area that we all sometimes take for granted. Their condition as they're driving on this road is of concern, and not only to the people who have holes on the road. The speed with which they go is very often good on the way in, but very fast on the way out when they realize that, well, this really doesn't go anywhere. I believe the solution that will best serve the community is identifying the concerns of all residents. Please don't call a community meeting, as might have been suggested the last time. Very often, this is an effective way of dealing with it. However, many of the people involved are seasonal cottagers. Our cottages are closed. We're not up in the area. And the idea of an internet meeting to solve a problem like this and discuss it certainly is not the optimum way. So I ask that you not go that way. I believe that the solution will be best served, yeah. But I do believe.
I hate to cut you off, but you're well past your 5 minutes. So are you close
okay.
to kind of wrapping up, please?
Okay, I'll wrap it up. I believe we have to know why the people are doing it, because we may be able to come to a solution that really doesn't have to do with a court case, doesn't have to do with all these other things, because it'll get things together. Second ask would be that I would have is that somebody from your staff, because you people have experienced people, you have an idea of what the costs are going to be. You have an idea of what has to be done to maintain that road at this time. So if somebody would come out and meet with a ratepayer, sort of to go over it and give us a basic idea. So if we get together as a group of ratepayers, we have an idea of what work is required. I'm hoping that somehow we can come to a cooperative way of solving this problem by maybe re-identifying it, not getting caught up in this all this other type of thing having to do with the Road Access Act. Thanks for listening. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Ken. So your comments will be taken into consideration. Thank you for being on this evening.
Okay.
Okay, and now we move on to items not on the agenda. So any person who wishes to appear before council regarding an item not on the agenda may make written application to the clerk by the Thursday preceding the meeting they wish to speak at. To register, go to www.georgianbluffs.ca delegations or call the clerk's office at 519-376-2729 extension 603. And this evening, we welcome Natasha Akwawenzi to speak to us. And I'm not going to try and say that word. I'm going to ask you to tell me how to say it. So, Ms. Akwawenzi, you have 15 minutes to speak. So please come up to the podium. And welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me into this space, and hope that I don't bore you, but don't think about that. So my presentation will be 15 minutes. So please, somebody let me know if I talk too much, because I do talk too much. So let's talk fish. This is my story and my experience. And thank you to Open Day for Council Cove Open Day for the invite here. So let's talk fish. It's my story, my experience. Right, thank you. Good job. Introduction. This is me on the Alvar. If any of you have been on the reserve, we have a beautiful Alvar. We'd love to take you a hike on. And the region of tour guides by ecotourism. On a hike. I married Andrew Akwawenzi, who is a sustainable fisher from the Chippewas of Nawash. I am from Black Sioux First Nations. I'm literally at the end of the highway before you fall into a lake. The rest is ice roads and flying canoes. So I'm a northern baby, and I married a commercial fisherman. And I'm a vegetarian, just as a fun fact. So We owned and operated a fishing business for 15 years. We fished, processed, smoked, and sold fish at farmers markets in Owen Sound. You might bought fish off of me on time, Lion's Head, and Toronto. We were sustainable fishers. We lived and sat by hands. We fished over a small boat, small hunt, not a ton. Next slide, please. Fishing in the early 200s. We knew where the fish were. Surprising, they were in the water. There was not a lot of algae. We could spend 5 days on the water, 2 days on land due to weather. We had some good ice along the shores. Do you guys remember when there used to be ice on the shores? Oh, actually on the water, as far as you could see. I don't know if we've had that for a while now. There was more whitefish than any other species. I knew where to find whitefish. I knew where I could have a whitefish dinner. My sons could make French fries. I could make the fish. We would have a good supper. There's a lack of ice coverage that was becoming obvious. I don't know if you guys see that often, but I know the ice is gone. Next slide, please. A few years later, whitefish were about equal with all other fish like lake trout, salmon, and rainbow trout. Lake trout were noticeably smaller and all about the same size. So lake trout are fat fish. Oily fish, they're okay, but just take a little bit more trick to smoking them because they slide off the skin when you smoke them. Again, I was the smoker, so I kind of know this. Days were beginning to become harder to get out on the water. We were now having 3 to 4 days out on the water in a week. There was more algae in the nets, and bycatch like suckers and lingcod numbers were dropping. Does anybody know what a lingcod is? Okay, ugly, and they like to pee on you if you catch them. Next slide, please. The last few years, lake whitefish were getting harder to find, and I mean really hard to find. And my husband knows the water like the back of his hands. Overnight, years before we catch 40 fish, that's 2 fish boxes. We're not talking a lot of fish here. A fish box holds 20 fish, so we catch 40 fish. We were down to 35 at one time. It would be 35 whitefish and 5 lake trout. It was becoming 2 whitefish and 32 lake trout and 6 salmon or other things like pickerel. We were lucky to get on the water 4 to 8 times out of a month. That's really hard to make a living. August 2018, we walked away from our business, realizing that lake whitefish were in trouble. That was a decision made of principle. That wasn't a decision because we were bankrupt or anything else. We had a wonderful. Bogota Rod Lines was formed in 2018. If you see the chart at the side of that table, that is from last month. I need any commercial fisher, sustainable fisher, needs 2 days of good weather to go fishing. So the first column is the date. Second column is the wind direction and how strong the winds are. And this is in knots. Next column is the temperature of the water. We're going to talk about the temperature of the water because we can talk about ice. Next one is how high the waves are. And that's in meters. The other one is the period between the waves. So if you have to turn around a boat, that's how much time you have to turn the boat around. And the next one is ice, if there's any ice out there, and we don't have any ice in October. So this was last month. This was only a couple of weeks ago. Was it a couple of weeks ago? A week and a half ago. Now, all those red, beautiful banners, not for birthdays. It's for strong wind warnings. We don't go fishing on strong wind warnings. So what I see up there is I see 1 day to set a net, October 1st, 1 day to go lift a net, October 2nd. We have to pull the nets out until October 11th, where we can reset the nets. October 12th, we're able to pull the nets, get some fish. Hopefully we have something. And that is about it. So that, I don't know how you make a living off that. I'm good with numbers, but that's also if you catch fish. So you have to find the fish. You have to know where the fish are. It's a lot of water out there. And you have to have the weather to work with. Next slide, please. These were all very cheerful notes, by the way. So this is Boggawa Alliance. We're Indigenous-led and managed environmental group. We were formed to bring attention to the decline of lake whitefish and to climate change. This is the short list of what we've done, and I mean super short. I mean, we could have 6 pages like this, but this is very quickly what we're going to do. Bird, animal, bat, flora, fauna, amphibian surveys. I know how to count frogs, and I can listen to bats on a phone. I can call my bat. They're good. Habitat restoration, species at risk. I can list off a lot of species at risk. Unfortunately, I can see whitefish is coming onto that list one day, possibly soon. There's also a lot of transfer of knowledge, storytelling, communication in film, photography, and social media. And there's so much more, like language, cultural stuff, and ribbon skirt making, and hiking, and camping, and canoeing, and just endless amount list of things to do. If you want to know how we torment the youth, we got 3 of them in the audience today. Next slide, please. I'm going to give you a little bit of history about the Great Lakes. Since we don't know what lingcod are, we're going to quickly run through some of the species of fish and how they came to be. So lake trout ruled the Great Lakes as the top predator. I like talking about my top predators like T-Rexes. And we'll say the whitefish are like, I don't know, what's a grass eater? Dinosaur. Stegosaurus. Good one. Let's do Stegosaurus. So, as you see, 10,000 years ago, we had glaciers. Actually, we're losing glaciers at rate really fast right now, talking about climate change. The lake trout populations crashed, 1950s, overfishing, invasion of sea lampreys. Has anybody seen a sea lamprey? They're lovely. Supposedly Prince Charles or King Charles likes them smoked. Fun fact. Sea lampreys invaded the Great Lakes in the 1930s and expanded their range and numbers of preying on fish. Has anybody seen a fish with a lamprey bite on it? It's a lovely kiss. Next slide, please. Following the lake trout collapse, the invasion of alewives. Fish exploded in numbers in 1960 due to lack of predation. So we brought in a Pacific salmon. Beautiful. This stocking initially in Michigan and Wisconsin. Coho salmon. I love coho salmon, but not that common for here. Reason I like them is because I could smoke them and they were beautiful fillets to smoke. They were bright red, thick. That's the first time I've ever seen a 3-pound fillet. It was on a coho salmon, but they were soft. Next slide, please. Coho and Chinook salmon started spawning naturally. They learned how to make babies. Along with the intensive stocking, this led to a population and collapse in the 1980s. And we're going to talk about mussels, which was not a lot of fun. They do a number to your hands too. If you're a fisher and you have to run your hands over the nets to get the fish out, your hands also get sliced and diced by those critters. Salmon populations crashed in the early 1980s and into the early 20s due to lack of food. And I can tell you that other fish are suffering too because their heads would be massive and there was no body to them. Next slide, please. The dreissennid mussels, I love that word, by the way, continue to expand due to lack of predation. Lake productivity was dropped due to the mussels feeding on plankton. And these little stupid little things, the round gobies, was introduced introduced a new predator on the whatever. I'm not going to try to say that word again. These invasive species all came from the Caspian Black Sea. Lake trout are starting to feed on round gobies, and will they rebound? I don't know. I hope not, because lake trout again are lovely, but they're not really lovely. Next slide, please. Not the fun topic. Climate change. So, as I already mentioned, we have no ice. Water's warm. It's a big body of water to warm up. It'll take a long time to cool down. And as we know, the record temperatures right now are not in our favor. Whitefish desperately need cold water. They're cold water fish. Frequency of wind is keeping fishers on shore. Not safe to go out there. I have done that walk many, many times to walk down to the shore and wondering if my husband was going to get off the water. And I also know the wind speeds. Wind speeds increasing, as you saw in that chart, increasing dreadfully. Risk goes up, has damaged the nets, moves the algae around quite a bit. And this was all data that from my science guy, Dr. John Anderson, has collected all of this and helped me put the slideshow together. But yeah, so very shortly, this is a very quick overview of what I saw, experienced, and what I continue seeing through Bogota Water Alliance. And just as a final and closing note, last slide, please, is that I really feel that we need to start thinking about other critters than just humans. When we make a decision about something, we need to take the entire ecosystem with all of its inhabitants before we make a decision to change it. And right now, the fish need our help. Just because we can't see them doesn't mean that they don't exist. Thank you much for your time.
Thank you much for your time as well. Wonderful presentation. Councillor Day.
Thank you very much for coming in tonight. I'm really glad you were able to come and appreciate how long ago you began planning this. And I figure just for council, we had our cultural mindfulness training recently, which gave us a broad view of Indigenous people in Canada. And accompanying that, I think it's very important that we also look at what's happening more locally as well. So the more we can do to learn and improve our understanding, I think is beneficial. I think it's really good timing that you're here tonight when we're looking at the corporate climate action plan as well, where we can take a concrete action tonight and get that in place. And finally, Natasha maybe was being modest when she didn't mention many of the events that she runs. If you would like to join, I'm going to guess there might be some garbage cleanups, shoreline cleanups in the new year, maybe not so many in the winter time. But I have definitely helped along the Wyerton and in Harrison Park as well, and maybe someday in Georgian Bluffs we could co-organize one together. Thank you again. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. I really enjoyed that. Councillor Coburn?
Thank you, Mayor Carlton, and through you to the delegation. I appreciate you presenting as well. I wondered if we might be able to get a copy of that slide presentation. And it's okay if it's intellectual property. But it is a really practical way of showing us what the direct impacts of climate change are. And I just really appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm just going to ask, there is a website that I found when I went online kind of researching what Bagaduwad Alliance was. And I think a lot of that information is there on the website as well, isn't it? Thank you very much. Anyone else on council? Okay, we will move along. Consent agenda. Does anyone have any items on the consent agenda they wish to pull? Councillor Coburn.
I would like to pull 9.2.2, which is the board minutes for the Bryce Harbor Conservation Authority. And then I'd ask that we pull 9.4.1 for staff to speak to that report as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Day.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to pull 9.1.2 and speak to it briefly.
Okay, anything else? So the recommendation is that Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs adopt the consent agenda for information as circulated, less items 9.1.2, 9.2.2.2, and 9.4.1. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Day, Councillor Winters, is there any discussion? I'll call the vote. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. So we will start with, switch back, sorry. 9.1.2. Councillor Day.
Thank you. And I will be brief. I just figured it might be relevant to the audience that we have here tonight to hear about the rate hearing for the Ontario Energy, going through the Ontario Energy Board for Enbridge Gas. And I just accidentally closed my agenda, so I'll reopen this here. But they're currently taking comments on their application for an increase in the cost of natural gas. It feels as though the cost is being put on the taxpayers, and the reason for the cost increase for natural gas is being put on the carbon tax and not on increased production costs from the gas company. So if people would like to make a comment, I'd be happy to send them the information about how to do so, and or you can Google it on the Ontario Energy Board site and under notices. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So no further action than that, just people to contact you if they want to. Okay, good. Thank you. Councillor Coburn on 9.2.2.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. 9.2.2 is a review of the board discussions at Grey Sauble Conservation Authority around the proposed renovations to the administrative building. I would just like to take this opportunity to say that I have concerns about this. I know that there is an identified need for renovations to accommodate staff. I just wonder if now is maybe not the right time to be committing to these renovations with the high cost of building and materials. Municipalities are already strained, even with our own budget. We're asked to consider increases, for example, to water rates. I just don't know how much more we can expect of our ratepayers. And I wondered if either of our reps on that board have a cost estimate for these renovations. I'm also concerned that maybe members of the general public aren't aware that this is in the proposal, and it would be nice to know what the proposed timelines are for that budget increase. Thank you.
Councillor Day.
I can do some digging to find the cost estimate. I don't have it at my fingertips, and very much dislike giving estimates when better numbers are available. I have asked Mr. Lantier, the CAO from the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority, to really justify the need for the timely renovation of the building, and he has said he would do so, perhaps including some photos of the leaking roof. So I'm still waiting for that information to come from him, but I definitely hear your concerns.
So I understand things like leaking roofs, that would be general repairs. But when I sat on the board and was part of the initial discussions for the renovations, it was far beyond the sort of general maintenance. It was a full redo of the building, including some additions, education room and different things. And again, I'm concerned that now is not the right time with the high costs of building and materials. And if maybe this is not something that's better pushed down the road a little bit.
So if I could comment there as well, I know that there's going to be a verbal update in 2 weeks at the next Grey Sauble Board of Directors meeting. There's also an article apparently just came out in the Sun Times today about this that I haven't had a chance to read yet, but apparently it's very thorough on all the information. And one of the issues that the board for Grey Sauble is kind of faced with is the fact that the existing building now does not meet accessibility standards. And as soon as they start doing anything to it, they're going to have to bring it up to those standards. So they're looking at that. The educational component part of it, that was a separate kind of wing. So I think part of the idea is to not go forward with that, but to go forward with the rest of it. But there's not a timeline established yet on that. It's really just getting all the pricing and such together. I did, before it was on that September 27th meeting, forward it to our head of finance for comments there and took those comments back to Grey Sauble. So this isn't going to happen right away. I think the board is also cognizant of the fact that this is quite an expense and how is it going to be paid for? And there are not sufficient funds in reserve to do it. So it's not going to be a quick process. And I think we're all very aware of the fact that yes, funds are tight, and to put that added expense onto all municipalities in the watershed isn't going to be easily digestible by anyone. So for sure, Councillor Day and I will stay on top of that. And as chair of Gray Sobel, I definitely am in the loop most of the time on this stuff. So, Councillor Winters.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question though, for those of us that aren't on the board, I assume the board's exhausted all options looking at, is the location suitable? Are we looking at rental properties? Are we looking at a facility that currently exists off-site? Are we strictly stuck on the fact that we want an office at that property? That would be my concern. I'm not sure that that meets what I consider the usefulness of that. And we look at the Ministry of the Environment, I look at the Ministry of Natural Resources, the Niagara Escarpment Commission, all of those agencies rent.
I would say that prior to me getting back on Gray Sobel a year ago, a lot of those questions were asked. I'd have to talk to the CAO out there and try to get the answers as to why they've determined to go ahead with the new build. And because I know those questions were all asked about whether that was the appropriate location, whether rebuilding that building, renovating there was the best way to go forward. So I know those questions have been asked. We just need to maybe get those answers. What Mr. Lanthier has also offered to do is come to each municipality and speak and answer those questions in person. And I see our acting clerk putting her hand up.
Through Mayor Carlton to council. Tim will be in attendance at our December 6th meeting to present the Conservation Authority's budget. And perhaps at that time would be a great time to ask any questions about the renovation itself.
So I think the board of directors at Gray Sobel, they're trying to keep the two things totally separate. So Tim is coming to speak to the 2024 budget ask. We should alert him ahead of time if we're going to be asking questions about the other as well. And he may not want to combine those two, which would be understandable because it could get a little confusing. So I can talk to Tim about that as well, and we'll see what we can get for that next meeting. Councillor Colbert.
Thank you. So you seem to be indicating, and I just don't want to make assumptions that it won't be an ask for the next budget. Then it'll be down the road some. And then I wonder procedurally, is it up to you and Councillor Day to be approving that or making those decisions on our behalf, or will we have some deliberations here at the council table? Because that additional cost certainly does impact our ratepayers. So I just wonder procedurally how that decision is made.
So what has been discussed is that this will come out to all of the municipalities who are in the watershed for everyone's approval before it goes ahead. I don't see this being something the board of directors will decide and then just come back to their individual councils that say we just spent X amount of dollars. I can't imagine anyone of us would survive long we did that. So no, it'll come back to all the councils. Councillor Day.
To clarify another part of that question, the renovation costs would be in next year. It would be separate from the levy, but we are talking about next year's budget.
But that hasn't been approved by the board of directors yet either. So while that may have been proposed, I don't see that moving forward quickly. Would be just my kind of take on it. There's no other questions or comments on that one. Then we will move to 9.4.1, the Dead Stock Capacity Initiative. Councillor Colbert.
I would just turn this one over to staff, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Carlton. So we'll provide a bit of an administrative update. There's a little bit of a gap, as we can see on this report. It should have been noted then within the consent agenda to read
that report COR 2023-47 be received for information, and that staff be directed to share information regarding the dead stock program on the township's website for eligible parties. Just a bit of an update regarding that, there would have been a recommendation on there. We would likely provide a link to that guideline, the Increasing Dead Stock Capacity Initiative guideline, and any other information that we sent there.
There further comments or questions on that one? Councillor Thompson.
I'm not sure. I can. So Councillor Schuldeis, you'll remember, referred this staff forward, and although I think the letter from the ministry made it sound as if the ministry, or as if the township could apply for. At the time, I can give you some context. The challenges for farmers in our township, there is no dead stock capability at all. So where years ago, if you had an animal that you lost, make a call, and I can tell you $70, they would come remove the animal, you get $70, the world would continue to unfold the way it is. And at this point, north of, I think north of 21. So I think there's still some ability for our southern farmers to use dead stock, but north of 21, I can tell you there is no service. So your dead stock needs to be handled on site by farmers, which necessitates either a facility where you compost your own, which is very expensive and onerous, and not many people have, or you're more often using a backhoe or a contractor backhoe. So it would be great to see someone in our community maybe move forward with something like that, but and I hope a local body would do that. So that's the challenge. I can give you the context. I didn't on that day because, but that's a bit of a local producer's challenge.
Thank you for those comments. So moving on to correspondence. Yes, Carly.
I also move.
Councillor Coburn is seconding. Councillor Thompson moved. Is there any further discussion? Does anyone wish the recommendation to be read again? I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So moving on to correspondence. We have 5 letters from various people about the Corporate Climate Action Plan. And I think there were some additional ones emailed to us this afternoon that I read. Those are all for information. We have no motion or anything. So I would just leave that with everyone to read. And I would thank everyone for sending your letters to us. It's very much appreciated. It's always nice to know we're doing something people actually like. So moving on to committee reports, committee of the whole. Recommendation is that the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting held on November 1st, 2023 be adopted, including recommendations COW 2023-113 to COW 2023-133, unless someone has any one of those they would wish to pull. Councillor Coburn.
Sorry, I'm just reading 12.1.1. I think that's the Shallow Lake Dog Park one, but it's coming back as a proposal, so we'll have time in the future to deliberate that one a little bit more. So I won't pull that one at this point in time, but I would like to pull 12.1.12.
Okay, so the private road update is the one that you're referencing. Okay. There are 2 on there. There's also 13.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, I believe Councillor Coburn wishes to pull 12.1.13.
Yes, I think so. Because 12 is just waiving the procedural bylaw. 13. That's okay. No problem. Okay, so does anyone else have an item they like to pull from there? Seeing none. Now I forget if I have a mover and seconder.
Through you, Mayor Carlton, yes, you do have a mover and seconder. However, we'll need an amendment to the motion to pull recommend COW 2023-125. Need a mover and seconder for that amendment so we can discuss that separately.
Okay, so the amended motion. The amended motion is going to reference the one that we have pulled. So I need a mover and a seconder. Go ahead, Carla.
Through you, Mayor Carlton, yes. So the recommendation will need to be amended to read that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held on November 1st, 2023 be adopted, including recommendations COW 113 to COW 2023-133, less recommendation COW 2023-125.
Okay. So can I have a mover and a seconder there? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Thompson. I will call the vote. All in favor? It is carried. Then we're back to the main motion as amended. I will call the vote on that one then. All in favor? It's carried. Now we will discuss the item we pulled. Okay. Councillor Coburn. I think that was
It took a while to get here. Are we good? Okay. Okay. At my own peril. Some of Councillor Thompson's words echo in my mind from the last meeting. That being, so what are we doing? Are we doing anything? Are we doing nothing about private road? Is this issue going to come back the next term of council? We're going to be voting on a motion that asks us to accept the report as information. And so it feels a little odd for me to ask for a recorded vote on that, because when do we not vote to receive information from staff? That would seem silly, except that I don't feel that we really do have all the information. I don't know that our mapping is officially understood. I appreciate staff's time in digging back through historical documents, but I don't know that it took us anywhere different. And I know originally council had asked, or at least given approval for the spending of a certain amount of money for a legal opinion. And I know that we didn't, in my mind at least, we didn't spend it on that. And I at first was wondering if maybe we ought to do that. Maybe we ought to spend money on a legal opinion, or maybe we ought to look at proper surveying to determine where our road actually is. After hearing Mr. McPherson speak, perhaps he's correct in saying that access is not the issue. And it doesn't seem to be after his discussions with his neighbors. But I still do have concerns. I just feel like this one we haven't had any definitive closure on this. I know that was meant as a distraction. I'm joking. I am concerned about the emergency vehicle access, and yes, it's passable, but if someone's having a heart attack where seconds matter, this does concern me. And so that is something that I delved into a little bit over the past week. Some councils have approved minimum standards for private roads. And one of them notably states free of potholes. so that emergency vehicles can access those homes without having to slow down and without wasting precious minutes or seconds. We don't have that. So I do wonder if there's something more that we could do. And after hearing Mr. McPherson speak, I feel even more resolved about that. He had a specific ask that perhaps we enter into some kind of discussions, help to facilitate that. I know we did discuss that. Staff felt like we didn't have a role in that regard. But I don't have any answers. I just feel like this has not been, just hasn't been resolved somehow. I feel like it hasn't. And so if we have nothing further from this discussion, if there's nothing more that we can think of that we can do, then all I can do is ask for a recorded vote so that I can have on the record that I don't feel satisfied with the information we had to make proper decision. So I'm curious to know if any of my colleagues on council have any further thoughts on the matter.
I would just have a question, I guess. What are we voting on?
Well, we know we're voting to receive the report for information. That's all we have before us, which is why I feel like we're really just kicking this can down and for next council. Because there is no resolution. It's just we're receiving information, which is the same information that council received last time.
So that's what I was wondering. Were you putting something new in front of us for us to vote in a different way to give us different options, or are we just receiving that information?
Sorry, Ryan, Councillor Thompson. I'm looking for my council colleagues to make some suggestions. I don't have any answers, but I do wonder if we could instruct staff to have some kind of engagement with the community so that the resolutions are found so that it's a safe, passable road. Sorry, we're good?
Yeah, we're good. Keep going.
Okay, I'll stop talking and I know Ryan has his thing.
Well, I think I'm probably curious. I'm curious about the process because I can appreciate what you're saying. But ultimately what you're saying is I want to do it. Okay, because we have already voted. We had the conversation. We said we're voting to receive the report. So today I think we're trying to unreceive the report, maybe. So I don't know if we can do that. I'll leave that to them after I'm done. So I appreciate Councillor Coburn bringing this forward, and I appreciate the reason for doing that, and I support the reason for doing that. So I'm not on the opposite side of the fence. I'm on the same side of the fence, which is let's resolve to do something. I probably don't agree that we haven't done enough. I think we've done the legal opinions, we've done the legal opinions, we've done the staff reports, we've done the research. I think now we're at the point where we asked mom and she said no, we asked dad and we said no, so we went down to grandma's to see if we could get a different answer. And I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, although we can all agree that's a bad analogy. I too was moved by Mr. McPherson's comments today, but in a different regard, because what I have heard up to now is a lot of neighbor disputes and a lot of neighbor disputes standing in the way of a road. What Mr. McPherson is suggesting is maybe that information is wrong and there's more unity than we believe, which is great. Let's get out of the way and let the people that own the private road work together on a solution. So if the people who are saying these potholes exist, I maybe misheard, but I think I heard landowners who are saying, I definitely intend to fill that pothole. Great. That's our problem, I think, is the potholes exist. So if the people that intend to fill the potholes want to go ahead and do that, I think that's terrific. I am confused about don't hold a community meeting, but let's have some talks. Like, I don't know what's the difference between the two, but I don't know that I really want to that. I think there is a parallel to comparing private roads in our privately owned roads, let's be clear, privately owned roads in our community. I know that there are some and they band together and they provide for the maintenance, the treatment, the snow plowing, the whatever needs to be done. I'm not sure that I think after Mr. McPherson's talk, I'm not sure we need to be more involved. I wonder if we need to be less. That was. But I applaud you bringing it forward. I'll support.
Councillor Winters, did you have a comment?
I support Councilor Coburn. I mean, I did leave here last week again thinking this isn't over yet. We haven't done anything. I agree with Mr. McPherson. I think that if there's community will to do something, we should do it. I still have the notion in the back of my head, though, that I don't know that we've ever been answered the question of, we used to maintain that road, and say we as Keppel Township and Georgian Bluffs at some point in time. So we did assume ownership and maintenance of it, and we walked away from it. Have we ever been given that answer clearly, that we have no obligation to maintain? I think we all try to confuse the notion of access, which isn't the question at the table. Everybody has access through that road. But if we're going to sit down and we're going to engage the residents, somebody's going to turn around and ask the municipality for some help. I want to be clear that we can only help if we have an obligation to help on a private road. I still think there's a question that needs to be answered, but I think if we can facilitate conversations with the community, that's great. I think one of the big asks of Mr. McPherson that clearly state is, I think we could provide some signage there that would help their cause. This is a private road. There is no access beyond this point. I think there's something small that we can do there. Because I think when it leaves the Big Bay dock, it is municipal property at that point. So I think there is opportunity, and I agree with Councilor Coburn. I don't want to see just information because I don't think it's over yet. But let's put it to bed. Let's help everybody and put it to bed if we can.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Pringle.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Carl. Yeah, I gotta agree with Councilor Winters and Councilor Coburn there too. I don't believe we just take it for information. We're just gonna relive this again next year. I really did like Ken's points today on, maybe there's only a couple of bad apples out of the 32 that are out there that may be causing the grief for some of them. I don't believe I'd want to be the property owner. That was the reason why an ambulance didn't get to my house to pick up a family member. I don't think I can live with that. So I think the conversation needs to be had. I think we've tried to overthink a lot of what's gone on here. I get it's a private road and all the rest of it, but at the end of the day, I think it's a matter of we can't use that road. We don't have access is there, but it's not there for emergency purposes. So again, I think the picture got too big and we've tried to relive too much of it here. 100 years worth of information we've gotten. I just think neighbors need to get along a little bit better and do the right thing, fix a couple of potholes, whether we have to be involved in that. Again, as Councilor Winters just said, it's not really our spot to maybe be involved, but they're still part of our community. So we got to work with the people that are within our township and do the right thing. And again, I seen the report coming through there today. I wasn't happy with the fact that we're just going to try and make it go away because I'm afraid it's not going to go away. And I just read my point there. I really believe it's escalated way out of control. What's really being asked, I thought Ken really brought it home there today and was asked what he was asking for in conversation with his neighbors.
Councillor Day.
In spirit, I really think the folks at the end of the road should be able to get there safely. And I'm also cognizant that we've heard from one side of this issue. So it feels complicated and like we don't necessarily know what all the neighbors are thinking and how big of a barrier it might be to assume that everyone or hope that everyone is going to be able to work together kindly when there is private property at consideration. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, has there been a legal opinion on this in the past in one of the other years? Do you have that information relatively close at hand? What year we got the legal opinion?
To you, Mayor Carlton, and there is a point of business we do need to get to because we actually don't have a motion on the floor at this point in time. So the clerk did remind me of that just a minute ago. Yes, the legal opinion, we got legal opinions in 2011, in around 2011, and a follow-up legal opinion in around 2013.
So what I heard from Mr. McPherson is that there seems to be some change in ownership and maybe a change in thinking on the residents down there. I also heard him saying not to do a community meeting, I think because at this time of year, most of them have closed up their cottages and aren't available to be there in person. So I wonder if it's possible to reach out to Mr. McPherson and see about planning something for the spring and try to get people together at that time and see if there's appetite for neighbors working together. If somebody's indicating they're going to fill in some potholes, does that answer part of the problem? But to figure out at that point, what can the community do to working together? Because in essence, this road goes across private property. And even if the township has put some maintenance in years ago, it's still not a road on our property. So we need to have a conversation with the neighbors to find out what are they looking for. And I don't think we've ever heard consistently from all of them. We've heard from the odd one, and they didn't seem to get along. So I'm wondering if we have Mr. McPherson, who seems to be speaking to all his neighbors, reach out to them and see if they could come to us with a solution that would work for them, and then we can go from there.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. I hope staff is agreeable to that suggestion, and I think the spring would be a good time or early summer. So I'll let them comment on that. I just want to go back to something Councillor Winters said, and I think it's a good question. We have done maintenance on that before, so what do we have an obligation going forward? Does that change the status of the road? I think that I would like to have those questions posed by Councillor Winters answered. That's possible. And it doesn't have to be tonight.
So do we need a motion on the floor, or are we just sort of doing staff direction?
Through you, Mayor Carlton, it's procedurally most appropriate to put the motion that Committee of the Whole passed on the floor, which was that report CAO 2023-012 be received for information, and then any amendments to that motion can be made to provide direction to staff.
So if we were to vote on that motion now and it were defeated, then we would bring forward a new one, or we want to put an amending motion on the floor first?
Through you, Mayor Carlton, if we could put the following on the floor, that would be excellent. And then we can add any staff direction as an amendment to that motion. The current motion from Committee of the Whole just reads that report CAO 2023-012 be received for information.
Can I have a seconder? Apparently it's not going to get that far. Do we want to give the direction added to that first? So we're amending it sort of.
Excuse me. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I know,
It's
that's-
not on the floor to talk about. So none of the conversation that you have currently had actually means anything because you
So-
haven't actually even put it on the floor to discuss.
Right, so that's what we need, is this motion on the floor to discuss before we can do the amendment. And I have a mover to seconder, Councillor Coburn, Councillor Day. Okay, further discussion. I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Mayor Carlton. I believe I can answer some of the questions which may help some of the further conversation. So staff have looked to Councillor Winters, Councillor Coburn's question. Staff have found no rationale that would support us proactively going in and maintaining private property. So why we did it in the first place, don't know. Not been able to find that answer out either. To why we stopped doing it, again, aside from it being recorded in a file that I passed by and then repeated in 2005, 2009, 2011, 2013, 2014, we stopped because of resident concerns about the access. The concerns have been numerous that are in those files. They go from speeding traffic, as we've heard, they go to traffic using it, they go to public use of that road, misuse of private property, people drifting onto private people's front yard, backyards, and so on and so forth. There are numerous different reasons. But I have found no rationale while proactively our past maintenance of that road should cause us to go back into private property and continue that maintenance practice today. So that's the first question. And again, our legal opinions suggest we have no obligation to maintain it. To the second point, which was around, I believe, staff working with Mr. McPherson in terms of a further conversation. I think Mr. McPherson's delegation this evening was excellent, and I think he highlighted significant issues. Is that municipality being asked into this conversation means that we have to find a reason for the municipality to be in that conversation. That reason can only be if we have a maintenance obligation or ownership of that road, because the municipality does not get involved through any legislative mechanism in neighbourhood conversations. So the rationale for the municipality being involved is an obligation owed to either the road or to the residents under the Municipal Act and various other pieces of legislation we have on our hands. Staff have found repeatedly there is no rationale for the municipality to be involved in these conversations. That is, to Deputy Mayor Pringle's point, where the conversation became elevated beyond what it is, which might be as simple as, can a few potholes be fixed? The municipality has limited, if any, role in understanding if it can influence those potholes being fixed. And so let's answer the question, do we have a role in this road? Which is what we've been trying to do for what appears to be the last 2 decades, with the same answer being found. We have no legislative mandated role to be involved in this road. However, if Mr. McPherson, as a resident who reached out to have some support in helping engage a conversation with 1 or 2 or maybe 3 residents or a wider community group to try and resolve a specific problem, then I believe staff would be more than happy to help Mr. McPherson convene that conversation in whatever way, shape or form Mr. McPherson, as a resident of that area, feels might be the most appropriate way. So I can say that staff would be happy to reach out to Mr. McPherson to understand what that conversation might look like as the township coming in to facilitate a conversation. Rather than trying to solve a problem, we are simply working with the community to solve an issue. That is very similar to other work that we do on a regular basis across the township, so it wouldn't be as ordinary. If that's long story short, if you were to receive this report for information and to direct staff to have a follow-up conversation with Mr. McPherson to see how and if the township might be able to support resolving the specific issues of access on the road, without the township being seen to be trying to solve them itself, but facilitate a community resolution, I think that would be very appropriate.
And everyone agreed to that as a motion moving forward. So amendment to say the direction to staff is to reach out to Mr. McPherson to see how the township can help facilitate convening a meeting of the residents there to help them work toward a solution. Rayburn's got that all down? Perfect. Okay. Any other conversation here? Seeing none, I will call. Mergler and seconder on the amendment. Sorry. Councillor Day, Councillor Coburn. All in favor? That is carried. Back to the original motion. All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Okay. Give me a minute to find out where I am in this. Papers. Staff reports. Oh, it's just been commented, and I think everybody knows that through all of that, we did manage to pass the climate action plan as part of that. So thank you for being here. Okay, we are on to bylaws. So the first bylaw, the recommendation. Whereas council has given consideration to the written comments submitted by the agencies in the decision on proposed zoning bylaw amendment application Z03-21 for William Keith Miles for property located at 217433 Concession 3 Derby, Georgian Bluffs. And whereas council has considered oral submissions made at the public meeting, therefore be it resolved that council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs is satisfied that the proposed amendment is consistent with the provincial policy statement 2020 and other governing regulations, and that bylaw 2023-071 be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Deputy Mayor Pringle. Is there any discussion? All vote, all in favor. It's carried. Thank you. Next bylaw. Recommendation that bylaw 2023-073 being a bylaw to adopt the 2024 to 2028 multi-year accessibility plan and repeal bylaw 2019-119 be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Winters. Is there any discussion? Call the vote. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next one, that bylaw 2023-074 being a bylaw to adopt a policy for integrated accessibility standards policy and repeal bylaw 4-2010 be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Thompson. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Next is bylaw 2023-075, being a bylaw to adopt a policy for accessible customer service policy and repeal bylaw 40-2016, be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Deputy Mayor Pringle. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And the last one here, that bylaw 2023-076 being a bylaw to dissolve the Shallow Lake Village Improvement Project Board and repeal bylaws 2016-041 and 2018-051 be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Thompson and Councillor Day. Is there any discussion? I will call the vote. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Unfinished business. Participation Lodge Grayburst Municipal Support Request. Recommendation is whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has had a significant impact on staffing in the developmental healthcare sector, and whereas competitive remuneration is essential to the healthcare sector if it is to remain viable, and whereas there is a need for greater funding to attract staff to maintain the standard of care required for individuals receiving support. Now therefore be it resolved at the Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs hereby supports the Participation Lodge Grayburst in its request for a $500,000 increase in base annual funding to cover rate changes for staff, a $235,000 funding request for staff salaries and benefits, and a $200,000 funding request for required technology. Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs hereby supports the Participation Lodge in its call for the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Children and Community Services to review and act on their commitment to the developmental sector and address the critical funding needs required to continue providing care to supported individuals. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Winters, Councillor Day. Is there any discussion? Call the vote. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. New business. The Kemble Women's Institute meeting report. The recommendation. Whereas the Kemble Community Center renovation was deferred due to an increase in costing, and whereas residents of the community of Kemble have expressed a need for a community hub, now therefore be it resolved that council hereby directs staff to investigate options for a township-wide facilities review subject to budget approval, and that staff be directed to schedule community meetings across the township, including within Kemble, to build on feedback provided during other engagements such as Derby Community Center and Kemble Arena renovation to inform the facilities review, and that staff be directed to work with the community in Kemble to enhance existing recreational uses of the Kemble Arena property where feasible, utilizing funds and grants, if available, from the former Kemble Community Arena Committee in 2024. I have a mover and a seconder. Deputy Mayor Pringle. Seconder, Councillor Winters. Discussion. So I will speak on this one. Councillor Thompson and I had gone out and met with the Kemble Women's Institute and the combined United Church Women. And I had in the document there some of the concerns that were expressed by them. Their major concern has to do with having a facility within Kemble that they can utilize for recreational purposes and potentially year round. So they're looking at now maybe wanting to have some card games through the winter. They've been having pickleball, various things like that. They wanted assurance that that community center is still going to be there for them. They also, as a community, indicated when that original building went up, they were the ones who very clearly supported and worked for, as a community, to have that built. It apparently was at a later time that it turned over to the actual municipality. One of the things they would like to have would be some kind of playground type area, because apparently the playground equipment was taken out a number of years ago, never replaced. And their feeling is that leaves the children of that area of the community with no place to go. So they have a few asks as part of that. And I think as part of the facilities review would be a good place for us to look at some of those items. I finally just late yesterday got a number of the woman to call who apparently is the family lineage on that property. I haven't had a chance to call and talk to her yet, but I will do that and see if we can resolve that kind of the ownership, because if that property is not used by the municipality for a recreational function, it would turn back to the family. So we don't know what the family feels about that at this point. So we need to, that was one of the asks that the community had, was, could we do that? As I say, I just got the phone number, contact information yesterday. Does anyone have any questions, comments? Councillor Coburn.
Yeah, I think I support the recommendations. I'm not entirely sure I agree with all of, with respect, Mayor Carlton, all of your thoughts expressed necessarily at that meeting, but that's okay. That will come down the road in terms of a new facility. I do want us to be, and I had a phone call about this today, I want us to be cognizant of the fact that Kemble, this current community center that we have is in Kemble, but it's utilized by a wider community. I know that several members of Cobble Beach, for example, use it for pickleball. So I would just be, I would like us to be aware going forward when we're looking for feedback in terms of enhancing the use of that facility, that it's not, we don't want to just be looking at the residents of Kemble proper. It is meant to be accessible to more folks than just within that village. And I think this reads as such. I think that's the intent. So I'm okay with that. And just something little, you mentioned about cards and whatnot. I know that there was a desire to have shuffleboard go in there, and that's something that's cheap and easy and relatively quick to do. I'm hoping we can move forward with that if there's still an interest. And heating is definitely something that folks would like us to explore so that it can be used for a greater part of the year.
Thank you. And I hope I was very clear with when I spoke that evening that some of the things that I was kind of presenting to people were my thoughts. I was not there speaking on behalf of council. These were ideas and such that they could use moving forward because it isn't just going to serve Campbell. You're right. It goes out to a wider community in that area now. And I think the group that were there are quite interested in reaching out, working together, and finding out what's needed for the future because planning for it today and what the people today need doesn't cover what everyone needs 20 years from now, 30 years from now. So I think they would like to do in some ways what they did the last time that community center was built and get together as a community and work together to find a solution that works for them. And then let us start looking at architect drawings and going out for funding and doing fundraising. But let's get a plan and determine what is actually needed there because it may be more than just a place to go play pickleball and it's probably not going to be an ice surface again and that type of thing. So I think they need to be realistic about what the future needs. Councillor Thompson, did you have anything to add?
Well, I was going to support what you said. I think it was a there's a passionate group that was there. It was an interested community group. I think that the report was an accurate reflection of the conversations there, and I think you spoke to a community health at the event, and that had mixed. I mean, that I'll just use that as an example if you don't mind. That had mixed reaction. You know, some people were able to see, okay, I see down the road how that might have an application. There was at least as many people on the other side said, no, I don't want to muddied up with all these other partnerships. I just want the damn thing. And so that's the challenge is everybody wants it to be simple enough as long as it makes sure that it meets their very own personal needs. The trick is when we all have to get together and include all of our simple needs so that it reflects the needs of those who want to play shuffleboard and those that want to play pickleball and those that want to play cards and those that want to have dancing. So it is a trick. I think what we tried to say was to the group that was there, the facility as it's being used now doesn't behoove us to stand in the way. It's going to cost us the same today as it did a month ago, whether it's being used every day or virtually the same as it's being used every day as if it's being not used at all. So we tried to encourage people to get organized with ideas that they can start using it now while we look for an answer. And the spirit of the group that was there was definitely that they wanted to have input into the decisions. And I think Councillor Coburn makes a great point. It's, you know, in our facilities, in a township as that is the nature of ours, we have a number of proud little hamlets, villages, corners, intersections, places, and we can't have a community center in each little center. We have to have areas that are shared. So, you know, if the people from the surrounding area are coming to use a facility located in Kemble, they're going to have some support too. That's good. So probably too long, but supportive of your comments. I think there is going to be a trick for staff to negotiate the needs of many to build a simple facility that meets everybody's needs.
Thank you, Councillor Day.
Speaking of staff, this was one of the first things that came up when I was new to council last year around this time, and the funding fell through. The costs grew beyond what the grant at the time could cover. And are there any timely updates from staff, or is that still pending regarding other grants or other developments with the Kemble County Center?
So through you, Mayor Carlton, at this point in time, staff are not progressing any specific work on the Kemble Community Centre. As noted in the recommendations, and as I believe we've talked about with Derby, indeed, at other times during the year, a facilities review, a more comprehensive facility review will help inform next steps, both at Kemble, Derby, and anywhere else.
Thank you. Councillor Coburn, go ahead.
Thank you. Just quickly, and not to beat this to death, but in Just moving along, Councillor Thompson's comments about the larger community. The recommendation does say that staff be directed to work with the community in Campbell to enhance existing uses. I wonder if a friendly amendment could be that you work with our community in general, just so that we're not missing the voices of folks who use that facility who aren't in the village.
Councillor Winters?
Thank you. And to support Councillor Coburn there, I was going to recommend that we, work with the community to enhance existing recreational uses of the Kemble Hillside Arena properties. I don't know why we'd look at one and not the other. We're going to engage the whole community.
I would agree with that. Do we have the Derby Community Center or Hillside covered in the paragraph before that as part of the facilities review?
Mayor Carlton, I am extremely sympathetic to the words of Councillors Coburn and Winter in this one. However, I believe the intent of the last paragraph is to specifically utilize funds which are remnants of the former management committee, which was a Kemble-based management committee. And so I believe that the intent of the last recommendation there was to direct the specific use of those funds. So I believe that those funds came from a specific community group, specific organization with a specific geographical remit at that point in time. And the intent was that last paragraph speak to how those funds should be applied. I believe. I may be wrong, but if that is the intent, then I think it probably would be straying beyond that last recommendation is specific to Kemble because it was where those funds, and there's about $18,000 thereabouts of funds that remnant from that community, which were specific to that building, specific to that, I think.
Yes, and I think that was the intent of that last paragraph, was to look at using those funds that had been turned over to the township at one point and through budget process, see what we could do. Do we have additional funds that we could put in there to add to get, even if it's basketball nets or something like that at the existing community center outside where the kids can go and play, give them some kind of playground that's close within that community. So I think that's the intent of that one. If everyone's all right on that.
And so through you, Mayor Carlton, just seeing the nods around the table, just to make it abundantly clear, if and when staff undertake any engagement exercise, any facility, regardless of where it is in the township, is a township facility. And so our engagement efforts will strive and welcome input from any member of any community in the township and indeed beyond the township. As we heard through the Derby Community Arena, our community centres are used by an extraordinarily broad audience, and indeed there are many residents of Owen Sound that are regularly 2 or 3 times a week currently using the Kemble Arena as well. So all 3 of our community centres have an impact across the entire township and beyond our boundaries. So when we talk about these, we will always make sure we are as inclusive as possible in those conversations.
Thank you. Any further comments from council? Seeing none, I will call the vote then. All in favor? Is carried. Next item, 16.2, Francis Lake Drive. I will turn it over to Councillor Winters on this.
I don't want to ask for an update because I know where the update is. Back in May, we had a delegation from Deborah Mercer representing the residents of Francis Drive, wondering when that section of road was going to be completed. And their ask isn't great. Their ask is, let's finish some of the shouldering. Let's remove some of the obstacles, the buried boulders that exist along the other side of the shoulder that cause issues for our plows and their cars and whatnot. Let's delineate where the edges of the road are so they don't continue to drive off the road. So they came to council in May. I joked about it at that time when council gave direction to staff to work and finish that section of road. Would we see it done in August? Kind of all joked. August came and went. September came and went. In October, I met with the acting CAO and not sure the actual title of the individual in our roads department, and we walked it from one end to the other. And I gave it a history of here's what it is. In my mind, and I think in the mind of the residents there, it's not a great task to undertake. But I did see a response that came back and said, oh, we'll put it on the 2024 for budget deliberations. I'm getting inundated with phone calls in my neighborhood about, hey, these are safety issues. This is a year. This has been going on now since 2021. I think it's time to get this done sooner than later. Just seems like it's dragging on and dragging on. And I agree. It's not a great task to do. Should have been done this summer. We have the forces. We had the equipment. We had the excess fill to deal with it. Here we are. It's, snow's upon us again, and we've got residents with safety concerns. We're putting it off until 2024. I don't feel comfortable with it.
Okay, I think I can agree with you there. I'm not sure what our next steps are here. The acting CEO, and you have a response here.
Through you, Mayor Carlton, I'm not sure I got a question. I got there was a statement made, and you're quite correct. We haven't done work. It's not our intention to do work this year. We do have budget actually for this already set up, and so it might be subject to a budget request. The budget is already there. Staff are working on addressing the commitments that were made to the community. I think it's fair to say this road is far from an assumable condition. It is not a typically municipally maintained road. It's taken me some understanding, and that understanding I gained in October, less than 3 weeks ago, with conversation around what the intent of the assumption was to adopt a similar standard to the standards that were implemented in the new subdivision on Big Rock Road. So that's the direction we're now moving forward on. The road as it stands right now, and with the greatest of respect to Councillor Winters, the work that's needed done is relatively light touch, but it's a road, and I want to make sure that when we make the relative light touch to this, we are not exposing the township of Georgian Bluffs and residents to any further liability there might be. So planning that light touch is what we're undertaking. I have no shadow of a doubt that this is work that will be achieved in 2024. And we are working towards doing that within the already approved budget that has been provided. So I believe this is moving. I'm moving it along as promptly as I have been able to do so. It's been a busy summer, and this one just wasn't the priority in May. So we haven't got to it, but we are working.
Thank you. I guess my question would be, is this road, has it been assumed by the municipality now? So we have assumed it, it's just work that needs to be done. Okay. Councillor Winters.
Two parts of that, and I respect that. It was a busy summer, but as a councillor, as a council, we gave direction that it should be done, and we assumed it would be done this year. So it's a little disappointing that it hadn't been done. The other ask of the residents is there something we can do in the interim before the snow flies about delineating where the drop off is so they don't all end up in the ditch again? I've been struggling with how we do that, because any markers we put on that side of the road will disappear the first time the plow goes down the road. We're back into the same situation. And again, it's a liability risk. We've been identified as a council that there are safety concerns on this road that the municipality. You've been plying it for 2 or 3 years. So it's a catch-22. We're in a bit of a circle. If we could come up with some sort of interim solution that identified the obstacles and the safety zones, I'd be okay with that until we came up with a better plan. Sitting here and just saying we're going to wait until spring. Oh, I think we've got some liability exposure.
Is there a direction or a motion we're trying to move forward, or it's just, guess I'm a little unclear on what we're trying to do here.
Well, the two part of the question is there something we can do sooner than later? And as a council, when we say to staff, hey, we give you direction, do we intend to be having the same conversation a year later when the assumption was in May that we wouldn't have this conversation in the fall? That's really where I feel as a council that, wait a minute. I brought it up several times, and in May, we should have said the rate varies over here. We're not going to do anything. We don't think it hits the radar. But it does hit the radar. There's safety issues. It's not been maintained road. So, got to figure something out. If it snows 2 feet tonight, then that's a moot point. We can't do anything. But how do you mark the dangerous sides of the roads where 2 residents indicated they've slid into the ditch already? One has indicated that the slope near or in proximity to their driveway is causing them to fall. They put out the recycling bin. That's all stated in emails. Is there something we can do on the interim, or are we waiting till spring and we just tell the people, suck it up? Not a position I like to take.
I'm a little lost as to what we're doing. Councillor Coburn.
So I wonder if our motions in the future need to include some timelines. Perhaps this one didn't have, and I think that might be helpful for staff. Helps them prioritize and it helps manage our expectations as well. So is there, I guess I'm just gonna ask it, is there something that we can do right now to help mitigate the safety risks? It's an interim measure before we do the complete work in the spring. Do you have an answer to that, or is that take some looking into?
So through you, Mayor Carlton, winter is on us. So as of right now, no, I don't believe that there's anything that we can do to address the concerns that Mr. Winters and residents have raised before. That's me being absolutely honest and frank with you. We're going to get winter weather this evening, and we may get another 2 or 3 weeks of reasonable weather. Looking at the job, there is more than, if we were to deploy our crews on this, I would lose the entire operating team, who are busy doing other things, which would then not get done. And arguably, we would not end with the product which was promised when this road was assumed. Staff are working on a way of addressing the promise that was given when this road was assumed.
So I'm going to suggest that that's unfortunately where we have to leave it, that staff are working on this now. Apologies to the residents there that it didn't get moved forward this year, and let's hope we can get it moving first thing in the spring. And I don't see that there's anything else we can do at this point. And yes, I do feel for the residents. So thank you for bringing that forward, Councillor Winters. And I guess we just move on. Councillor Thompson.
So I don't want to get involved into the operations of it all. I think probably finding some. Councillor Winters is right. I think that, or I agree that finding some areas where Councillor Coburn suggested we need to set some timelines and revisit them if we were going to miss them. Sure. Makes sense. That horse is out of the barn. From an operational standpoint, I don't know the value of that. I think what I would be curious about is, and I don't understand the operations of it all. It's not my strength, so I'll have to rely on professionals to tell me about that. My curiosity is when we say liability. So I don't feel like I have an appreciation of what the risk is or how severe the risk is. So I guess I'm confused about what's the risk, how critical is the risk? And if we're saying we can't do anything to mitigate the risk, that's a bit confusing to me, because I think then I would say if the risk is severe, you should be able to do something to mitigate it. So I'm not questioning it. I'm just unsure about it yet. And I feel a bit awkward just sort of running away from the conversation. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm in about the same position. I don't really know how to move forward. So
I can try and help a little bit there, Councillor Thompson, through you, Mayor Carlton. So the primary area of concern that residents have raised, and I believe Councillor Winters has shared with me on the site visit, is approximately the first 200 or 300 meters, 250 meters in on that road from concession 14. The road has been cleared. Road width has been cleared from trees, and in that section on one side of the road, there is material surplus, so sitting higher than the shoulder. There are rocks on the shoulder of the road, which there are rocks on one side of the road, on the other side of the road, there are an absence of rocks, and it goes down. So there's a hole on one side and there's material on the other side. The challenge that creates, the residents have articulated, is the low point of the road, the lower side, the ditch as they call it. the shoulder of the road is basically you get to the edge of the road, you get to the edge of the shoulder, you go into that ditch. In winter, delineating the side of that road and that ditch can be challenging. From the operations side, as Councillor Winters noted, the material on the upside of the road causes a challenge for operators, particularly during winter, but also during summer maintenance activities. So in the winter, when an operator goes along, and I'm sure you've all seen plows do this, the first pass of the plow is basically to open up the side of the road. They make successive passes and they push the wing out to the sides of the vehicle, and the wing seeks to push back that snowbank to create storage for the first pass the next time it snows, but also to keep that road width fully open. So the presence of material on the upside of the ditch, on the upside of the road, means that we can't put the wing out because the wing's going to hit the material that's in there, and that's an operator concern. I've been in a truck which has hit debris like that, and it is extraordinarily uncomfortable if it doesn't do damage. So hitting stuff on the outside is a concern. On the flip side of the road, we have no problem with putting the wing out, but there is no clear delineation for members of the public whether they're driving then on cleared road or whether they're driving over basically a flattened snowbank. So the opportunity for rolling into that ditch is more significant. So having walked that road now 4 times with various different people, that is one area of concern on that road. There are multiple other areas of as significant liability concern. We have telegraph poles which are set that are inches off the travel portion of the roadway. We have private property artifacts which come within mere feet of the roadway. We have sections that section of the roadway measured is about 6.5 meters wide. We have sections of the roadway which are under 4 meters wide on that section of Francis Lake Drive. So there are numerous obstacles and hazards along this roadway, which mean that this roadway is far from an adoptable or assumable condition by this municipality. The roadway is also just contained within the allowance. There are, in fact, sections of the roadway that get very close to and may even indeed extend onto private property because the road and the allowance are not one and the same, where the road is heavily offset with the allowance. So there are for sure liabilities associated with this road. Those liabilities are no greater today than they were in 2018 when we assumed the road in the standard to which we assumed it. In fact, they're significantly less because we have undertaken maintenance on that roadway over the last 12 months. So I agree there are liabilities here. Simply saying that the same liabilities that are there last year is not really satisfactory to me by any stretch of the imagination. But unfortunately, that's the reality that we are in at this point. We have a plan to address them, and I'm confident that we will be able to put that plan into action. This road is far from an assumable condition. We've got quite a lot of work to do on this road to bring it up to that assumable condition. Addressing that first 250 meters is a priority, but that is not the only part of this road that we have to do. We also found uncapped wells, for example, today on the allowance. So we have some drinking water concerns on this allowance as well. There are issues on this road. We are working to address those issues as quickly as we can.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from Deputy Mayor Pringle?
Just on the one with the snow clearing and winging the snow back. So I've been involved in a truck rollover. Same scenario happened 4 years ago where drivers come up to the corner there and the road's flat, looks flat all the way across. He pulls over. Next thing he's on his side. Is there any way that we can tip the wing to like a B at the edge of that roadway on that particular part to try and give some definition? Here's the road and then there's the ditch as opposed to just straight across. Is there any way they can tip that wing to do that in that section or any section like that?
So through Mayor Carlton to Deputy Mayor Pringle, yes, we're going with the drivers to delineate and work with them so that they know where the road is. They've driven that road plenty of times during the day. They'll have driven that road at night. They won't have driven it in the snow until the first time they put their plow down, but we will make sure that the drivers that are driving that route know where those hazards are. And through those first couple of snow events, get snow that sticks, it would be nice in some respects, but if we can get some snow that sticks, we will be able to delineate the side of that road with the snowbank.
Councillor Thompson.
I do, yeah, I do. I understand you. I appreciate that you feel the concern. I think it, driving the road a few times in the summer means nothing. I mean, if you think about your own laneway, there's a bend in my laneway. I've lived there for almost 30 years. And when the first snow comes and I don't have the stakes out, what I think is the road and what I actually blow is two very, very different things. So the hope that people will just remember where that road is impossible. I think that I trust that if there is nothing that we can do, there's nothing we can do. But it does feel a bit like Russian roulette going through the winter. And if one truck wing hits that product and flips, we will pay the price that we would have to, even if we're contracting it out. I mean, I say that as if I don't really know the costs of that, but I guess I would want to be sure that there's no intermediate risk mitigation that we can do to get us through.
Councillor Day.
If I might add a point on to what Councillor Thompson said, no, if there's action we can take that doesn't create liability somewhere else in the township because we're pulling people away from another section of road that requires attention.
So through you, Mayor Carlton, to Councillors Thompson and Day. At this point in time, we are relying on staff training. That's how we've dealt with this for the last 5 years. We're anticipating that we will be dealing with it in that same way this year. I am confident that we are in a better condition than we were last year. Next year, we will be in even better condition once again.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, we will move on to the next item, which is notice of motion. Does any member wish to provide a notice of motion? Councillor Coburn.
So not a notice of motion, but we've had several items of correspondence and a delegation tonight from Mr. Davenport. Is this something council needs to have a discussion about? What is our obligation? Is there a report coming forward that might cover this, or has there been one in the past that I've forgotten about? But I just feel like this is coming back to us and I'm not really sure what it is we're to do.
So I can take a stab at that through you, Mayor Carlton, to Councillor Coburn. There isn't at this point a staff report which is coming back specific to Mr. Davenport's delegation this evening. There's been some correspondence which council's been copied in on to Mr. Davenport, reiterating the position that staff take, which is Mr. Davenport has a good point. We entered into a subdivision agreement with Mr. Davenport, and that subdivision agreement was reliant on servicing being provided through an extension to the existing sanitary services on Cobble Beach. There was an agreement that the township entered into with Cobble Beach. That was a two-party agreement. It was between Cobble Beach and the township. There are a number of conditions in that agreement. There are some conditions in that agreement which have not been met, which mean that that agreement actually is no longer enforceable. There are no elements of that agreement which are any longer enforceable by both parties. Both parties had conditions, and those conditions have not been met. That agreement has not been delivered. And so it's no longer an agreement which is enforceable because one of those agreements had a deadline for that work to occur by the 1st of January 2021. The work did not occur by that point in time, and there was no amending agreement to that agreement in the first place to extend beyond. There's nothing that mentioned what happens after January 2021. It's just simply a case of if you do the work by 2021, that's the agreement. So that has not happened. So Mr. Davenport certainly has a point in that the township has entered into a draft plan of subdivision agreement, which at this point in time we do not have a timeline when we are going to have that sanitary service still there. We still have that agreement with Mr. Davenport, and as I've reiterated a number of times, we'll continue to work with Cobble Beach to try and find a way of bringing that sanitary extension out to Churchside Road East. But that does require an agreement between us and Coral Beach, who are the landowners of the land, the property that we would need to cross to put that sanitary extension.
So sorry, thank you for that explanation. And I wasn't necessarily looking for a conversation tonight, but rather did we need one in the future? I guess, if I may, there's still the option for this developer to return to his original plan with fewer lots and private servicing if that is what he chooses to do. That's still an option.
So through you, Councillor Coburn, that would require a new draft plan of subdivision to be submitted. That would not be accommodated within the existing draft approved plan, so a new draft plan subdivision would be required. And just for greater clarity, we do not approve draft plans of subdivision. That's a county responsibility, and so I couldn't comment on the likelihood of success of that.
Okay, so closed session, this meeting nil. Confirming bylaw then. The recommendation that bylaw number 2023-077, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council on November 8th, 2023, be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Coburn, Councillor Day, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Date of the next regular meeting will be immediately. And I'll call for adjournment. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Deputy Mayor Pringle, Councillor Thompson, all in favor? Is carried. We are now adjourned and ready to move into the next meeting.